What's going on, guys? On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the thing that Hollywood does best: pure, unadulterated originality. Brand new, original. Wait, what? Oh, they don't. They're not. Oh. I guess we're going to be talking about remakes. I guess they're more known for that. What's going on, you loyal listeners? Welcome to the L Squared Podcast. I am your host, Luke Larson. And today, like I teased before, Magnificent Seven's coming out. We're talking about remakes today. And joining me today, as per the usual, is my lovely and loquacious guest. It's the only one I can get booked. Is Old Legs.
How you doing, man?
It's good to see you,
How'd you sleep last night?
Surprisingly, I slept pretty well.
Did the sun come up? Did you sleep for 16 hours?
Right. So the sun didn't come up because I actually have really thick curtains.
That's not good.
I have really thick curtains in my room. I have blinds and then really thick curtains. So a lot of times the sun never comes up.
See, I was
literally, or like as far as positivity in my life, either.
I was okay last night. I was totally fine. Didn't really have a huge effect on me, but that's what I was worried about. If I woke up and it was still dark out, that's where I hit the panic button. So
yeah, I think you live in a little sketchier place than I do. Mine's a little more modern, a little more populated. I guess I live by a cornfield.
Oh,
if we watch signs,
I didn't sleep. I'll say it didn't have much effect on me, but I did not sleep here last night.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. I crashed on Chuck's couch. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
well,
so strength in numbers.
Yeah. Was I home alone? I don't even know. I think my roommates were there now that I think about it, and the cat. So
we saw a movie last night.
Yeah, so that's what we're alluding to here. We actually went to the Blair Witch last night, or just Blair Witch.
Is it?
I don't know.
Yeah, that actually sounds right.
Blair Witch.
Blair Witch.
Yeah. Not the project. And like I teased in the beginning, Meg 7's coming out, remake. And this Blair Witch, honestly, was, like we talked about a little bit, it felt a little bit like a remake of the original. It's kind of what Hollywood does. It's sort of a reboot sequel type. I mean, it was technically a sequel, but it felt a lot like they just remade it. And so, should we just talk initial thoughts? I liked it.
I liked it too.
Yeah.
So I think this is actually a really interesting subject and a really interesting start-off point for any kind of not any conversation, but this specific conversations, beings as it's relevant. I don't think we're the only ones that liked it. Especially if we're just talking specifically about Blair Witch, I think the first thing you go back to is, when did you see the first one?
Yeah,
because us being like, we're pretty solidly millennial. I think it was just like probably a touch before our time. When was
definitely,
when did the first one come out? Like,
I think it was 98.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and I was 3 years old at the time, so I wasn't into the whole.
You weren't
I wasn't a fan.
You didn't
see it in the theater.
Formulated your opinion yet.
I was still naive at the time,
right?
As far as movies go.
Yeah, it was on your list though.
Right. I heard about it. Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense. I actually remember like the cultural impact though. Like I remember my family, like my aunt and uncles and stuff like that, like, kind of like the news break type, this is like before the 24-hour like news cycle as well, but I remember hearing on the news like people running out of the theater, and just, and the brilliant marketing campaign of, the actors are gone.
They're missing posters. The
Yeah.
website was just like, if you see them, please let us know.
It's-
People were calling the actors' parents, telling them they saw like
Yeah.
the missing posters.
And it's kind of an incredible, it's an incredible feat that could only have been executed at that time.
Yeah.
Um,
And I looked it up. It was actually 99.
okay, so we were close.
So,
Yeah.
my palate still wasn't quite there, but I was
Right.
getting better.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll cut you a break on this one.
Thank you.
Yeah. So going back, I remember that I didn't see it until probably like middle school, and even not being in the theater, just seeing it, in like a random friend's basement, it still had a pretty big impact on me.
Really?
Yeah, it was terrifying.
So middle school's like what, 11,
Like,
12?
I would say like like somewhere between like 5th and like 7th grade. I can't probably pin it down.
So like 10, 11.
Yeah, so somewhere in there. I thought it was like fucking terrifying. Especially like growing up rurally, like
As we did.
my parents' house just is in like
Yeah, that's true.
out in the middle of nowhere. Out in the middle of nowhere, big woods, just kind of like a full circle. Your imagination just kind of takes wild at that age. But yeah, going back, I haven't seen it since then. My memory of the movie is just like I don't know if I even remember the movie. More so, it's just like kind of like the iconic, nostril up the nostril shot.
We're gonna
Like,
die.
I don't know if I'm actually remembering that or if I just like know of
That's
it,
just the iconic shot.
or just like the guy in the corner, the finale.
Those are the two things, and yeah, like you alluded to, it became a part of pop culture instantly, and it honestly almost became a parody of itself pretty quickly, as I remember it, because it was such a big deal, and everybody thought it was real for a short amount of time, and then once they realized it wasn't, it was like, you got us, and then it kind of became a joke of like, look at this shitty horror movie. An interesting note about that is the hunting season of 2000 was one of the worst on record in that area, because everybody was out in the woods exploring and like trying to like making little videos and just being out there being creeped out. It's one of the worst of all time because of that, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, so I actually
When did you see the film? Like the first one?
So I saw the second one first.
Okay.
And if you don't know about the second one, it is an
know
awful film. I saw it in probably 2007, I think, ish. I was about the same age. I was about the same age you were when you saw the first one, and it's just a terrible movie. And I remember we rented it on VHS, and it's like Blair Witch Project Book of Shadows or something like that, And we watched it, and there were like parts in it that we were like, oh, that's kind of scary. But then the ending, and we're like, what actually happened in this movie? Like, it was just awful. And then I find out later, when I become enlightened of how terrible it was. And apparently, originally the director of that movie wanted to make kind of more of a lighthearted, joking movie about it. Because that was kind of the feel of Blair Witch at the time, was kind of like almost a joke, and so it was going to be more of a lighthearted thing. But then the studio was like, no, we need a horror movie, so then there's a bunch of insert shots of really gory, nasty stuff. And I haven't seen it since then, but I just remember the ending twist was like, what? No, it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah, don't spoil it.
Right, yeah, I'm not going to, but you won't.
I can't wait to...
I can tell you won't see it coming because it doesn't make sense. But so I actually saw the original one only a few years ago. I think probably 4 years ago, and it was because me and a couple friends, we were gonna. We had this grand idea next to one of my friend's house. There's this little place in a grove called Brown's Farm. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes.
It's a creepy place.
We
We all know Brown's Farm. You guys out there, all the listeners,
Yes.
we know what that is. There's an old silo there, and it's in this grove, and there's this long road down there, and it's just a creepy place. So, like, we were kind of, like, obsessed with this place. So, we were walking back there at night, and it was really creepy. And we were actually at the time trying to plan like this big get together. We were gonna play Ghosts in the Graveyard out there. We're gonna get a bunch of people there, and like it ended up not working out because of whatever. It's a long story. Basically, because we thought we knew the owner, but it wasn't the owner. It was just a guy who rented the land, and the owner was this big stickler. And then we tried to sneak back there, and then word got out that we were back there. So then he started being back there more. Whatever. I probably didn't have to tell you all that. But anyway, so we were kind of obsessed with it at the time, and we were like, we should watch the Blair Witch Project because we had never seen it. You know, it was this big deal. We were like, it was kind of like the same vein of like being out in those trees, being scared, We were like, we should watch it. So one of the two friends, his older brother had it on VHS, and we watched it, and I remember we did watch it during the day, which was dumb. We should have watched it at night, But I remember us watching it, and it got over, and we were like, that was pretty underwhelming, And, I think we probably expected that going in a little bit, But it was more underwhelming than I thought it would be. Just because the whole, like, I think I said this last night when we saw it, the new movie, was that at the end I respected it more than I liked it, because obviously it's this big deal, and I think time had passed enough where it was sort of the type of movie. I think the movie itself was forgotten, but just the impact of it is what stayed and was part of pop culture. So the movie itself isn't that great of a movie. There's a lot of daytime stuff. There's a lot of just them being lost and like not having a map, and them saying that they're in the spot they were in, but you don't know, and them just yelling each other's names constantly. Like, I think she yelled Mike 1,000 times. It's like, Mike, 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 and just dumb stuff like they're going around, and then like they're having trouble with this map, and they keep like the map keeps switching hands because they're like, you don't know what you're doing, whatever. Well, then at one point, Mike just throws the map in the river, and you're like, Mike, what are you doing? And it doesn't make sense. And he just says, like, well, we didn't know we were going anyway. It's like, that's just dumb stuff like that. It's just stupid. And then, like, there were a couple of good parts. Like, there was a night part where, like, she wakes up, she's like, I think I heard something, and then just, like, it just starts banging on her tent, and you're like, holy shit. And then you hear, like, little kids laughing randomly, and that's kind of creepy. And then there were, there were little things they put in there that didn't make a lot of sense, and then the final few minutes are, like, kind of scary. They go to that house, and in the corner, and whatever, it's over. And, at the time, it was just that people just found this, it was supposedly they just found this videotape, and then it was a big deal, edited together, whatever. But, so, let's get into this new one now. So, one of the things that I really liked about it, and I've said this before, I'm kind of a sucker for mythology and, little Easter eggs that build a universe, And so I think they really did a great job of expanding, well, not really expanding it, just explaining it a little bit more, and not 100, but in a good way, and like really adding to it and highlighting what the first movie tried to be, and just made it a good horror movie with less drag, less. It's kind of a slow burn, but it's not that slow, because the first one is just complete nothing until the end, and this one at least really ratcheted up the tension, And then it was a really great ending to it as well. But what were your thoughts?
I thought it was really interesting, and this'll kind of jump into like our remake discussion. I think horror movies in general are unique.
Because they're scary.
Yeah, exactly. When you talk about remakes, because I think like 70 to 80% of a horror movie is the anesthetic, and I think there's certainly something to be said that with, as we progress, and certainly, you know, the level of technology between 1999 using home cameras and very little special effects to now will have like a profound impact on how you watch a movie, especially a movie that's just basically about being lost in the woods.
Right.
And so I think this is a really interesting candidate for a remake, and in this situation it actually really works. And it kind of reminded me of the recent Evil Dead remake.
I knew you were going there. I read your mind.
Yeah,
I knew it.
Same kind of thing. You have a long enough gap to where you think you can make improvements, and there's clearly things that can ratchet up the experience for the viewer. And so in this case, I thought all the way through, yeah. One of the really interesting things, one of the things I really enjoyed about the Evil Dead remake is they gave a somewhat convincing reason for being in this stupid cabin in the woods.
Absolutely.
Jane Levy's character being an addict and needing to
get away,
be able to detox. Yeah. This was, and granted, for any type of horror scenario, it's like, you're like, okay, that's
you extend,
still leave.
Yeah.
But
you extend your disbelief.
Yes, for in this case, the main character, it's his sister who goes missing in the woods. He never finds her from the original Blair Witch.
Yeah.
This is his thing. He's devoted kind of, most of his adult life to trying to find her.
Mm-hmm.
And when new evidence pops up, he's like, hey, let's go take a look.
Yep.
And I get that.
Yeah,
I understand that. That makes sense in my head. So already you have, a reason more than just for a random group of, teenagers
just
off into the woods and just getting wrapped up kind of randomly.
Yeah.
So I like that. That was the first thing that that was the first kind of thing that I was like, okay, yeah, this is good. They've actually put some thought into this.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? What did you think as far as?
Yeah,
your initial thoughts, I'll say.
Yeah. I think I'm really glad you brought up the Evil Dead remake, and I could see it in your eyes. I knew you were going to bring that up. You and I I don't know, I really liked the Evil Dead remake, so did you. Probably because, I liked Evil Dead a lot when I saw it, as most people did, And then I saw Evil Dead 2, which was kind of a remake of the first one with more funny in it. And then Army of Darkness is pretty much just a comedy, And I'm more of a horror guy, and I'm a big comedy guy as well. But I really liked it was just a really good low budget horror movie, and I really appreciated that. And then when they kept going more comedically, it was a little bit all right, it's not the Evil Dead anymore, you know what I mean? So when they did the remake, there were a couple things in that movie that really bugged the shit out of me, which we've talked about. One especially involving a nail gun, but that's fine. I've talked at length about that.
No nail guns.
Yeah, just don't put them in there. Just don't do it, please. Okay, now that we're done with that, I don't need to. But I like that because it kept that. It wasn't necessarily the low budgetness of the original. Really kept the grittiness and the closeness of it. Where the remake, it didn't feel as low budget, but just there were just some crazy scary stuff in that movie, and they really ratcheted up, and like you said, just that little bit of adding to we need her to detox. Like, that's just great. I mean, it's just a perfect little thing that just makes it better, more convincing. And then, the story itself, the movie just paid very good homage to the original and just made it scarier. They could have done something better of why he read the book, because that never makes sense ever. Never a good idea to open the book and read Latin.
Again, yeah, and it goes.
I don't know how you explain
it goes back to the horror kind of tropes. You have to make these concessions to move the plot forward and get to where you want to be, which is I mean, you can only do so much. So
right. So
again, neither of us in this room would have read the Necronomicon.
No. But we,
or any text.
No, ever.
Wrapped
in barbed wire.
I hardly read things I need to read.
Exactly. I never ever would have even, if I saw that thing, I would have just left. Even if I just saw the book, right?
Right.
I mean, he went through.
Most I would have skimmed it.
Yeah. I would never have read it.
Messed something up, and I wouldn't have, unwoken
right.
the dead.
But there's another scene in that movie. I know we're not here to talk about Evil Dead, but whatever. Who cares? It's our show, right? And it's a remake. We're talking about remakes, right? So there was a part I remember when I watched it with a really good friend of mine, Josh Wyatt. If he's listening, I'll give him a shout out. He's an okay guy. Just kidding. I love you, Josh. But we watched that together, and that was a big night for us. I think we watched. If it was the same night, I can't remember. I think it was the same night where we watched a train go by. No, we watched. I think we watched the original Evil Dead, Donnie Darko, and Memento. And Donnie Darko and Memento are two of my favorite movies of all time. A lot based on that night. It was just kind of one of those things. But I'm pretty sure it was that night. But I remember us watching it, and there was the part where the tree, like, quote unquote, rapes that girl, and. When we watched that, it wasn't real clear. It was the tree was just like stretching apart, and then I wish you could see it, but like just the branches went doop right into her her naughty place, and right in the old fun button, boop. And that's all it was. It was like a doop, and we were like, "What? Did that tree just rape her?" Like we had to rewind it. We were like, "Did that just happen?" It just boop. And we were like, "Oh, okay." And it was kind of funny, but in the newer one, they really went all out on that scene, and you're just like, "Whoa, jeez, oh my god!" Like, they really went into graphic detail, and like
there was very little need for forensics. Right. The next morning, it was a clear-cut case.
Basically, I didn't have to rewind it to see if she got raped or not. Like, it was pretty graphic. But anyway. All right, enough of Evil Dead. Back to Blair Witch. It was, like we said, it was kind of a remake. Just the added, like you said about the technology, just the added, like, deep, not Inception noises, but just the deep, just boom of the trees falling down. Just like that added a lot to it, instead of just the, hey, where are you? All the time. It was like, it just, that for me added just a lot, just the boom, which wasn't in the first one. And then, it made more sense with the stick figures being a representation of, they said that lady got pulled apart. They tied her up and put rocks on her limbs to stretch her apart. So then it made sense with both the rock piles and the sticks, and both homages to the original, really well done. The only thing, and another thing I liked was all the technology they brought, and of course it all malfunctioned, But like in today's world, like that's 100% what I would do. Is if you're going out there, I want as much technology as possible. Like walkie-talkies where you go, cameras with GPSs on them, a drone, all that stuff, because you think. Just based on the other footage, it was like, yeah, they just got lost out there, but all they had was a map and a dumb camera, like, with this, you have a bunch of technology, a bunch of stuff, and obviously it goes wrong, but, like, that was another little thing that it was like, yeah, I would 100% do that. I would bring as much technology as possible, The only thing I didn't really love was, like, there was one part that jumped out to me when the two the trash boy and his girlfriend. I don't remember their names.
One was Talia.
Yeah,
Talia
sure.
and Lane. I can't
Lane,
remember.
yeah, Talia and Lane.
I don't know
Wow,
how I remember.
wow, that's impressive.
That was one of my chief complaints is that I couldn't keep the characters straight.
Yeah.
Whose eyes you were looking through.
Right.
And here I am just rattling off.
Yeah,
the
there you
names.
go.
So,
But I didn't mind Lane as much.
That much of a.
I don't like the actress who played the Talia girl. That's just my own thing. I just don't really like her that much.
I liked her.
Well, next week we're gonna have a different guest on. Somebody who doesn't like that actress. I'm just kidding. We'll bring it back. It's okay.
I didn't mind her.
That's fine. And it's not just that. Like, cause I think she was in Following, that TV show with KB, Kevin Bacon. And it's not that great of a show. I mean, I watched it and I was like, this is kind of whatever. It doesn't matter, Luke. Get on with it. So she's in it. Whatever, fine. But then it's just like when they were like, but who is the Blair Witch? Oh, this is the story. Like they had one story of this crazy girl, this crazy old lady from a long time ago. Only one, and they knew all these details. And they're like, but, we don't really know. That was like a complaint that I had right away. Was like, oh, it's like in the horror movies when they're like, what's going on? Like in Paranormal Activity, which they're guilty pleasures of mine. When they're just like, oh, what's going on? Let's Google search. The first page they bring up has every single answer they'd ever need. Exactly what's going on. Oh, look at this. It says everything here. Just like, oh, this is a demon. Blah 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 blah. Whatever. Like it was just too. It was too much of just like, who's the Blair Witch? Like, I mean. It's like Falcone said, Batman Begins, because you always fear what you don't understand. Like I get, and it eventually added to the mythology of like being the things pulled down, whatever. They could have just said that. I don't know. It was just a little too convenient to have one
Direct.
Right, too direct, sure, of just like having one major story of an old lady. And they're still like, yeah, but we don't really know. It's just like, it was a little too easy. But like, I wish they would have done it more with like what they did about the corner thing, being in the corner. Like, it had a couple different things. Like, the one was the crazy guy who killed people in his house, the kids, and he said that he always put them in the corner and waited. Like, that was one thing. And then it kind of was a little bit of a contradiction when they said, well, you can't look at her, which was probably also part of it. But it was kind of nice to have those differing things. And then also, like, well, it happened in the attic. And then he's like, well, it could have been or she said the basement, and he said the attic. One of the two. They were like, well, it happened in the attic. Well, that's kind of debatable. They say it might have happened in the basement. I liked both of those, and they came into play later. It was just a nice little bit of writing to be like, well, we're not really sure, because it was a long time ago. And have a cool thing like that kind of be, I wish they would have done something similar to that with, I don't know how exactly, but just with the story of who the actual Blair Witch could have been. Does that make sense?
I think I know what you're getting at. I was okay with it.
Yeah, it's just exposition, and it's a little too in your face.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I understand that maybe there was a more creative way to tell the origin story outside of, a cheesy like flashback,
right.
to, which obviously wouldn't have worked, but that's like, I don't know like how else you would do that, going in, the slow shot into, someone's eye, into their mind, into the flashback. Like, I don't really know, like
a handheld documentary.
Right. Not really the same movie, but I understand like the directness, maybe kind of parsing out the origin story.
That's a good idea.
Over, the two nights, but like we said, this movie isn't quite the slow burn that the first one is. I would say once they pretty much upon entering the forest, like the tension is very visceral, and I would say everything after the first night, it was basically
nonstop.
yeah, and it turned into a very excruciating watch. Obviously, I think everyone, without spoiling anything, the finale is very well done.
Absolutely.
And I was very, we end up at the house, which is I'm not really sure where else you want to end up.
That's the only place you could.
But we end up at the house, and it's a long look into the house.
I loved it.
And you don't know where it's going to end. You have an idea of where it's all going, but it's just like, when are we gonna get there? When does this end? When can we, when can this be over with? Because at this point you're just like, please, like, something's gotta. I don't know how much I can take. I don't know how many more doors and staircases and
oh man,
vaults but it was really good. I won't say I enjoyed myself, but obviously enjoy is not the correct word. I was squirming for much of the movie. I'll also double down with you and say that I really enjoyed the use of technology. I thought it was gonna be a little more gimmicky than it ended up being. Like you said, a lot of the technology didn't work, which also makes sense. It reminded me a little bit of just kind of like the progression of technology that happens throughout the Paranormal Activity series.
Hells yeah.
I just remember, I have no idea which one it is, but whatever Paranormal installment,
Oscillating fan. Paranormal Activity 3, the best.
It's okay.
So good.
I don't know which ones I've seen, but that was like that was an actual thing where it's like, oh yeah, this is like that makes sense, and that adds tenfold to the experience
of so
not
good.
knowing what's coming up as opposed to just a still shot.
Yeah.
So
and then you're going back. It's just slow, and then when it stops, it comes back. And,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I didn't think it was. I will say that I didn't think it was at that level of innovation and that level of creativity, but I appreciated it that they did think out.
Because it gets
the technology that would be available to, like, I don't know what one of the girls was, just kind of a fledgling film student.
Yeah, and she met this guy, and she wanted to do a documentary for her final project, and then he told her about his sister, and so then they were going to do that. So, and I'm glad you said that about the gimmickiness, because that's kind of what happens with these found footage movies. It's like literally the whole time you're like, put down the camera. This is ridiculous. And it's annoying when they keep saying that. Like, why are you still filming? Put down the camera. It's just because they're trying to be meta, but it's like, yeah, exactly. You're just making it worse. But like with this, it made it better because they had those cameras on the earpieces. That was really cool to flip back and forth with. The drone going up to see if there's any openings. That was a great addition. And I really liked her good camera, and then switching to the Lane's shitty old Sony digital camera, and you could tell the quality switched. I had a fun time with that just because I'm kind of a little bit of a guy like that. Like, I just loved like the switch to the old shitty digital shots and then the new really good shots, from different angles and stuff. Like, that was just cool. It was fun to see that. And it was just... It was well made, and, I've heard some people say that they didn't love, they loved the last 20 minutes or whatever, but they didn't love the rest of it, and it's like, yeah, but, I think what it did, I think it really added to the mythology of Blair Witch. It really took what Blair Witch was trying to do, the project, and, made it better, in my opinion, as a horror movie. It cut out some of that slow burn. It was, like you said, it ratcheted up the tension right away. It made things make a little more sense from the original. The technology was cool, and it also didn't work. There was one kind of subplot that we talked about that I was like, I don't know if that needed to be in there. It just kind of took away from it. The only thing it did was it made them stop at one point, and that was about it. Didn't really have much to do with the rest of the movie. It was kind of in there. I could have done without that. It made for a cool gross out body horror thing, but that was about it. But anyway, if we were gonna, wow, we spent a lot of time on this, but that's fine. I'd probably give it like I'd give it like a 7.5 out of 10. Not higher, just because I think that it was good, shorter, nice, added a lot. The last part was great, but I just feel like the rewatchability might not 100% be there. I don't know if that's true or not, but I feel like it was just a really good horror movie, and this year has been good for horror movies. When other things have been kind of disappointing. So I don't know. I know you don't really like grades, but
Yeah, I don't like giving things ratings. I will definitely say that the first time experience, especially if you're gonna go see it in the theaters, is probably the correct way to watch this movie. I think I don't really have anything more to say about it. I enjoyed it. Had a good time.
Okay. Well, cool. Now, to broaden the remake kind of topic, it's been a little bit horror-ish. Like I said, Magnificent Seven's coming out, which is a remake of a movie. And it looks good. From the reviews, it's basically what I was hoping it would be, just kind of a dumb, fun Western, because it's not going to be as good as the original. We all know that. Or even half as good, but just as long as it's fun and isn't trying to be as good, I think I'll respect it more. As far as, and like we were talking about, obviously horror remakes, The Thing is probably the best remake ever. John Carpenter's remake from The Thing from the outer space, or whatever it was, from another dimension. But, as far as remakes go, what is kind of your stance on them? I'd just like to know, in general, what's usually your first reaction to them announcing they're going to remake something?
I would say this is not like a hot take or anything, but I'm largely skeptical to, I would say, 80 to 90% of the remakes that I hear about, and most of it is just kind of a product of the culture we live in, like the internet meme culture, 24-hour news cycle, to where, especially if it's like a classic beloved movie that's, only, 20, 25 years old, that still has quite a bit of cultural pull, but it's being, remade, and there's not really an explanation given for why. Right. So I would say my stance on remakes are, I enjoy them when they work and it seems meaningful, which is kind of like a cop-out answer, but it seems very obvious most of the time what's good and what's bad and what's just utterly ridiculous, and I usually don't have much problem making that characterization just, a couple minutes after reading, watching, a remake of Point Break, for instance, is in that category of utterly ridiculous. Something that's hardly 10, 15 years old.
Well, no, it's more than that, because it came out in 91, so it's almost 30 years old at this point, which is kind of scary. But no, what?
30 years old? I was born in 1990.
How old are you? I said almost.
Okay.
Round up.
25 years old.
See, that's almost 5. You round up.
Well, come on! Don't. Are you calling? Don't. You're old, bro. Don't come at me.
30.
Don't come at me like that.
Just a couple gray hairs. The hairline's going back a little bit.
Point Break is not that old.
But the thing that makes the Point Break remake ridiculous to me is that Point Break solely exists in that time period. Like, it is 110% an early 90s movie. And with it has just the absolute perfect roles, the best casting of a few roles. It exists in that time period, in that period alone. It's almost a time capsule. It doesn't translate to be remade. It is just so perfectly. It's what you think of when you think of '90s action. It's one of the few that come up, and classic young Keanu. Patrick Swayze is a revelation. I mean, when you watch that, you're just like, this is why I would follow Swayze. I mean, he's ridiculously good. Gary Busey's is crazy, just being Gary Busey, which works too. But it's just, I don't know, and so that one doesn't make any sense at all. There's some that like one of the best remakes over the past few years was Dredd, the remake of Judge Dredd based on the comic books. There was a Judge Dredd movie, came out in '95 with Stallone. I never saw it, but everyone said it was the worst thing of all time. It was just terrible. It was a dumb movie. That was before they knew how to make comic book movies, whatever. And then Dredd comes out in 2012. Didn't make a lot of money, unfortunately, but it's developed this cult following because it's amazing. It's such a kick-ass, crazy good, just Carl Urban is fantastic. Never takes the mask off. It's just perfectly what the character is. Dark, gritty, uses the R rating, 100% bloody, just like, and it's like, that's the kind of remake I want. It's like a movie that like didn't get it right, that had potential. Like that's a perfect one to remake.
And
is like
some substance too.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And like they did it well. Unfortunately, it didn't make money, and if it did, we would have already had a sequel, and whatever. They've been talking about a sequel for a while, but I doubt it's gonna happen.
Give me some more Carl Urban. Give me some more Lena Headey.
That's what I'm saying.
That spooky. Didn't she have like
Mama.
a scar on her face?
Yeah,
Like that?
cut up.
Yeah.
And then that drug slow mo, and then they throw him off. That's such cool filmmaking. I love that drug. Just a great. Just such a cool movie. So stuff like that, I know over the past few years they brought up a Back to the Future remake, which is just the worst thing you could do. I think that's
Wait, that's real? They made it?
No, they didn't make it, but they've been talking about it for a few years, saying, oh, there might be one coming, there might be one in the works.
Keep talking.
Everyone shoots it down. No one likes it. The thing is like, how I see it, is you could recast Marty McFly as being this cool, young kid. You can't recast Doc. No one's gonna play that better than Christopher Lloyd. That is ridiculous. You just can't. I'm sorry, I won't see it. One they announced recently was this studio bought the rights to remake Memento, and I almost puked in my mouth when I heard that. I was so ashamed. I was like, come on, because Memento is my favorite movie of all time. And I know people say, like, I think usually people don't like remakes because when the originals are really good, why remake them, And sometimes they do it okay, but, like, with Memento, it's like, it's just so near and dear to me, It's like, why would you do it? Like, why? It's just, well, it's not that old even. It's 16 years old at this point. It's ridiculous. And what you had said, one that remade a classic that I think did it better as of late was True Grit in 2010 with the Coen brothers. I thought that was much better than the John Wayne original. And I remember that getting, but those were master filmmakers as well. But I love that movie. That was a great movie. But obviously, I think
I'm wishy-washy with True Grit.
Why is that?
I wasn't crazy. I just wasn't crazy about it, and I also thought that the Coen brothers could be doing something different with their time than reimagining a story that's already been told. Them specifically, just because they do really interesting things, and they do a lot of original stories. So I wasn't a fan.
Yeah, I loved it, but again, we'll try and get somebody else on next time we do it. Unfortunately,
Strike two for me.
Unfortunately, Jordan's the only one who says yes to this. He's the only one who's available, unfortunately. No, well, I mean, I can see what you're saying, but I really loved it, and I think it was much better than the original. I think Jeff Bridges as a grumbling, I think he does really well at that. Obviously, I think there's probably, and nowadays, like we talked about with Blair Witch, it's kind of become a thing where it's not necessarily a remake, but it's like a reboot / sequel type deal that Hollywood loves. And obviously, Hollywood is redundant and just keeps remaking things even without remaking them, and it's just, I don't know.
Really, it's we're to a point now where they're using very creative measures to recycle old ideas. So just like what we were talking about with Blair Witch, they didn't announce it. What was it called? Like the Woods or something?
Yeah,
like
the
that?
Woods.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't. They dropped it on us like, oh wait, this is a Blair Witch or this is a Blair Witch thing, and like you said, it was like kind of a reboot, kind of a sequel, just mostly just a tune-up of the original.
Right. That's a good one.
And we're seeing more of that. So, I don't know what we do here. Do we applaud Hollywood for not just being outwardly blunt with, their laziness in coming up with new ideas?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I think that's
where does that leave us? I appreciate it. It's nice, but
I know it's kind of, I know you're touching on, like, when you do that, you're kind of flirting with disaster, as they say, and there's a lot of terrible remakes that are out there, but I like what you said, and I think that's when you make a really good remake, it's paying homage to the original, adding new things without making it too different, but also not making it too similar. Making kind of stand on its own, but you gotta really, I think the point of a remake is you always want to make it better. You gotta see some improvement and, really try and make it, obviously, see there are parts of the original that you could tune up. Like you said, we have newer technology now, maybe some of the story elements didn't work as well, and you can kind of touch those things up. I think that would be something you could really do. So let's jump into this here. So we had talked about a little bit, so now that remakes are getting made, 20 years in the future, what are some more recent movies that you've seen, the past few years that you could see being remade, that you would want remade? Are there any that jump to mind right away that maybe in 2030, 2035, they're gonna announce maybe is gonna be remade?
So, when you asked me this question prior to the pod, I did have to do a little research. I looked back. I thought of movies I'd seen the last couple of years that, maybe 10 years down the line you could revisit. And for the most part, it was the ones that jumped out at me were medium to bigger budget films that either were just not very good, or maybe the casting was wrong, maybe the directing was wrong, maybe the writing was goofy. Stuff that just missed the mark, but there was still some sort of content, or there was something to be had.
There was some potential there.
So a couple movies that came to mind were every Johnny Depp movie the last like 5 years. I think if you
Okay.
just substitute out Johnny Depp,
It'd be better.
you're already on the road to retribution.
Would you get Tim Burton back when he's older than he is now?
I
think you better not.
Well, I was just thinking. So let's take. How about a movie, Lone Ranger?
Okay.
Big budget movie,
Flop.
huge flop. Obviously, the argument today would probably start with having
Non-racist character.
yeah.
One that's just
very very easy things we can do to fix. Maybe not making a semi kids movie that adults can and enjoy. What was it, like 2 hours, and
it was kind of
almost 3 hours.
It's like, stop trying to make Army Hammer a thing. He's not a thing. Hollywood.
That's another thing. That's a really interesting point, because I feel like that's where a lot of these fall short. Is we think we have like a no-brainer A-lister, such as Army Hammer. So a movie like John Carter, same kind of thing. Same kind of thing. We have.
I was gonna say that you do.
What's his name? Reagan's.
Yeah, he.
Taylor Kitsch.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Say he was Gambit.
Same kind of thing. I think at that time period, he's coming off his Friday Night Lights run. He's done some interesting things. We think like, okay, this is guy like a for sure can't miss A-lister. Gets thrown into this, big budget.
Ridiculously big budget.
Was it a Disney thing?
Yep, it was Disney.
Okay. So, and it just.
Well, first of all, they should have named it. If they would have just named it John Carter of Mars, it would have been 10 times better already. John Carter is a terrible name.
I'll let you go with this. So
Okay.
You wanted to talk.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one I was going to throw out there. John Carter, first of all, just call it John Carter of Mars. That's what it was called before. It's a way better title. It's way more interesting. John Carter is just a normal white bread name. People are just going to be like, oh, it's John Carter. Like, what is that movie about? Some lawyer, It's a terrible name, for one thing. And John Carter of Mars, it already has a built-in campy sci-fi that you want, that it was, and it was way too big for its britches. It was this huge bloated movie, and I didn't mind it. A lot of people hated it, but I was like, it's kind of a fun movie. It shouldn't have cost that much, obviously, and it wasn't. But I think one of the things it was lacking was, like you said, that star. He just didn't have charisma to really drive you in, just like the reason that Keanu Reeves is Keanu Reeves is he has the it factor. He doesn't have much else, but he just has that thing. That's what he's got. He's got it all.
Speaking of Magnificent Seven reboots, iterations, okay, you can't have this conversation without talking about 47 Ronin.
What a disappointment for me.
Take any one of those other movies, and if they would have had 47 dudes, they would have won the movie like 50 times over. You think like 13 Assassins, you add like 47? Oh yeah.
Yeah, boom.
No big deal, Like 7 Samurai, same thing. Like, oh yeah, but yeah, okay.
Did you see 47 Ronin?
I didn't.
I saw it in theaters.
I saw the trailer, and ooh, was it good?
Yeah, I love the trailer. It's the reason I saw it by myself. And he didn't even say the best line in the trailer, which was, what did he say? Your life belongs to me. He was like, your life belongs to me. Then take it.
Go ahead.
If you can.
Take it.
If you can. He didn't even say it in the movie.
The classic Ken Watanabe trailer stealing line.
Yeah.
He has in, every one of his movies that he's involved in the trailer, the we are 47. And
which again, let them fight.
Guys, like, what was the big deal? You look at some of these like numbered, fighter movies, and like, wow, they had like they had a plethora.
Right. Don't remake 47 Ronin. You could remake this one. That wasn't my main pick. So one So what would you do differently as far as a Lone Ranger remake? Is that the one you picked, or just any Johnny Depp one? And would you do it like go back to a little more grittier weirdness? Would you want the weirdness of Tim Burton there, the gothic type of almost? I mean, it's overdone at this point, but how would you make one of them better?
Me, me personally, I don't think I would be very good at making a a kids movie that's also entertaining for adults. I don't know how I would do that. So I would have to go like at least like PG-13 and just make it more. Yeah, I would, and I don't really understand the Lone Ranger, mythology enough. Not that I would again,
it's not.
way before our time, but it it just seemed it just wasn't a thing like that. It seems so easy to correct because when you talk about that movie, you really you have a hard time understanding who the audience is. Like parents don't want to take their kids to it because it's way too long, and kids can't sit through it.
Right.
And and I yeah, I would just completely scrap everything with that movie. That one just seems like it was so there was so many things wrong with it that I don't think you're really missing out too much by just, going with a fresh
Right.
paint.
I think that would definitely be the best. You need a forest fire for that one. John Carter was going to be one of my backups. I know we talked a little bit about it, and I would have, if I would redo it, I would shorten it up, make it a little bit, I would quicken the pace because it's kind of, there's parts where it's up and then it goes way down and then it loses focus. I would try and tighten that up as much as I can, and and it would immediately make it better. But the main one I was going to go with is a movie that I actually really like and is actually aged extremely well. So, but I know that I came out of it thinking this, so I'm going to talk about it. Is a little movie called Killing Them Softly. Have you seen that?
I didn't. That was one of like not that it was really iconic or anything, but one of the last Gandolfini.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of his last, and he was
Along with
great in it.
Pitt, right?
Yeah, Brad Pitt.
Okay.
Really good cast. James Gandolfini, Brad Pitt, Ben Mendelsohn, an indie darling. Another guy who's in a lot of indies. The dad from Step Brothers, whatever his name is, he's great in it as well. Because I remember it came out in 2012, and it, like I said, it's actually aged really well. Ray Liotta's in it as well, and it's just one of those things where it's got a lot of just great pieces, just like there's like this piece which is phenomenal, there's this piece which is great, there's this piece which is great, but it doesn't necessarily flow as one great thing, it doesn't hit on all cylinders, I guess. But like I said, it has actually aged well, so I feel like it's just one of those things where I actually love the movie, and I think it's great. But what I think is that you could make it a more well-rounded movie, and you could kind of, I think the reason it's aged well is because it didn't do that, and like it's kind of its own thing, and so over time those gaps kind of get filled in with, because it's very artsy, so I feel like that really, like, I don't know, there's just parts of it that are great, and like I said, it's actually aged extremely well. But I feel like if that was like a Scorsese movie, he could roll out of bed and drunkenly make it better, because it's just a crime, mafia type thing.
It's very
Set
much in his
in
wheelhouse.
Right, and it's more of a modern one. It's set in 2008 during the crash and like the election of Obama right away. So it's kind of an interesting time period as well. But like if Scorsese, like I said, he could make it amazing, because he's one of the best. But it's made by a really young guy, and that's one of the best things about it. It's got this really young, visceral type feel to it, and like I said, it's aged really well. But I feel like a ways down the line, because it's kind of been a little bit forgotten about now, I feel like if you re-put it into the mainstream, um, I think I think you could do really well with it. It's just there's a lot of really interesting parts in it, and like just really well done stuff. That I feel like that one, because like I said, it's aged well, so I feel like it's not as well known enough that you could remake it in the future and people wouldn't even know that it's a remake. And then when they go back and watch the original, they're like, "Wow, that's really cool," something like that. And there's just aside from everything else, there's just like really cool film work done. Like there's a couple shots that really jump out to me. Like there's one where this guy, he just drove like from I don't know New York to like Florida and back or something. Didn't get much sleep at all. Whatever. So he's like, so this other guy's talking to him, and he's like falling asleep. Like you do when your eyes get really heavy, and like the camera, just the way it like things slow down and it slowly fades out, and then he gets woken up and you're back up. And it's just like really cool stuff like that. There's one shot where the camera's mounted outside the car door looking into the car, and when he opens it, it swings out, and then he shuts it. And it's just really cool, interesting stuff like that. And like I said, the story's really good. If I could just set it up for you here, it's basically like it's kind of this low level mobster stuff. So this guy gets offered this job where he's going to stick up this poker game, this card game, gambling thing, of these higher end mafia guys. And the reason that, because it's his boss who basically brings it up to him, and it was his boss's idea, because the guy who runs those games, this guy Jackie Ray Liotta, it was like a year or two ago, it was a while ago, what he had done was he set up, he realized how much cash was coming in and out of there. He set up a robbery where somebody came in, stole the money from the place. He pocketed it, and then it wasn't a big deal eventually. And so Jackie eventually told the guys that he did it, and it was all this kind of a joke because everybody loves him, and they're like, "All right, you got us that time," And then the game started up again. So this guy had the brilliant idea: is if they get robbed again, they're gonna blame Jackie, even though he's not dumb enough to do that. He's gonna be the number one guy that they blame. And that's the setup. And it's like that kind of setup is just great. It's just great writing. And so they stick it up, and there's these little things that happen, nice tense little moments, and then things get kind of messed up. Brad Pitt's called in because he's kind of the enforcer. So he gets pulled in by the guys who want something done about it, but the guys that are in power are young, so they're kind of hesitant about what to do. So the older guy, the stepbrother's dad, I always forget his name, a great actor, he's the middleman between the higher ups and Brad Pitt, and he's like, I know they're kind of hesitant, but you gotta do it. And like it's just great little things like that. And they progress. James Gandolfini, for the little bit that he's in it, is one of the best parts. I mean, he's a presence on screen. But like I said, it's just, and then the ending has like this kind of odd sort of political edge to it that I didn't totally get right away. But I think I get it now. I'm still not 100% sure. And I know I'm running a little long on this, but I just feel like it's a good time period. It's an interesting movie, and like I said, it's aged well, and I think that you could redo that, and I think it could be really good.
That's interesting. One thing I would ask, and it's just kind of like the crux of like remaking the movie, but what would you think the number one thing, like why it didn't find a bigger audience, why it didn't succeed the way maybe it could have?
Right, and I think I've asked myself that, because I know like that was one of the first movies that I was like, really, because I just saw the poster of Brad Pitt with a shotgun and a leather jacket, and I was in. And I'm a sucker for mafia movies, so like I had a lot of hype going into it, and it was just kind of this odd thing, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it right away, and like I said, it's aged really well. But I think one of the things that I love about it now, but it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, is just it's really dirty and gritty. It's just kind of this really, it's like deals with the underbelly and grossness of certain people, and it's like this is really grimy, I would say, parts to it, which isn't that attractive to people, you know, and I feel like, which added to it, but I feel like if they remade it, I would, the focus is a little all over the place as well. There's not really a main character. There kind of is, but then he's out of it for part of it, and then he's back in, and it's kind of like switches main characters throughout. There's not really one, and that kind of, it goes well. Like I said, now it's kind of interestingly made, but I just feel like if they remade it, it wouldn't. I think they could make it a little bit tighter, like I had said. I feel like if you had an actual main character and a little more of a through line, you could kind of get some more arcs. There's some good ones in there, but they're not like, there's really one, and he's pretty much the main character, but like I said, he's kind of in and out. But I feel like you could put more of a through line through it. You could kind of tighten it up, and that might, and that might take away from the uniqueness of it, but that's kind of what Hollywood does, But I just feel like there's just so much potential there that you could make a really good, like, mafia movie, and I feel like that's the main thing, is just there's just so much potential there that you could really make a great movie down the line, and not take away from this one because it's so different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a tricky question to answer, and you kind of got me thinking with some of the titles that we've brought up. So you brought up the idea of a Memento remake,
Yeah.
and how you were just automatically, out.
Yeah.
Because it's a movie that you hold very near and dear to your heart. But I think you could argue that it's a very good movie for people that have seen it, which I feel like is a relatively small audience. You think of Christopher Nolan, and what do you think of?
The Dark Knight, Inception.
The average layman, the average moviegoer is going to think of the bigger titles, when quite possibly his best movie is this very little known Guy Pearce movie where he's all weirdly tattooed and is all out of order and doesn't. So I totally get that, and I think when you said that, I would, again, me as well, there's no need to remake Memento. I don't care if people haven't seen it. I don't want to bring it to a larger audience.
Exactly.
Just go see the original one, and if you never stumble upon it in your life, too bad.
Yeah,
that's the stance I take. But I think there's examples where that case of bringing a title that's very well regarded amongst the people who have seen it and bringing it to a larger audience, it's worked. And it's also failed. And the two examples I was thinking of, the first being of a movie that was brought to a larger audience by Spike Lee, Old Boy. So he brings. I would call this an example of
a bad idea.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess I get it when you look at it in the lens of, okay, I'm going to bring this movie, this story to America and potentially do it better. Again, especially in this case where it's a foreign film and it's being brought to America, and most people will have no idea that it's a remake.
Right.
So in that case, you've succeeded. But in the case of actually executing a movie like that, it's so difficult. And there's such high expectations amongst people that have seen it that I feel like you're just setting yourself up to fail no matter what. In that case, I think he very much did.
Right.
I don't really think it holds a candle to is it the
Korean.
Takashi Mike?
We'll look it up.
It doesn't really matter, but
Okay. Well, I'm gonna look it up anyway.
yeah,
But Old Boy itself is an amazing film.
Yeah,
like
incredible.
It's Korean, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that's an example of one where, it is an idea, where you can get away with oh yeah, Chan-wook Park. I messed that up. Takashi Mike, I think that's 13 Assassins.
Okay.
Yeah, that is, because we were talking about magnificent numbers of fighters. Yeah, so I would say that I get it. I don't think it's a smart idea, but I see where you're going with that,
Right.
bringing it to an audience that is kind of unassuming.
Yeah.
I think another example that I thought of where it does work, so that you prove that you can work, would be the movie, I'm probably going to screw this up too, Let Me In.
Yeah.
The vampire movie.
The original Swedish one was
the Right One
Let the Right One In.
Yes.
And then the remake was Let Me In.
Yeah, and I think that's another example of where
It made both of them really popular.
I think yeah. At this point now, it's like kind of like a take your pick. Like both of them are excellent. And for I think the first time I saw the Let Me In, I had no idea it was a remake.
Right.
Until diving a little deeper, and you realize, oh wow, there's this Swedish version, and it's equally good. And yeah, so I think I've kind of talked myself into a circle here.
Yep. And I'll help you out a little bit if you want.
But I understand the logic for wanting to try to do something like that. But I feel like it's so difficult to actually execute, and I feel like you're much more likely to fail.
Right. I don't think you're wrong. I will say that Martin Scorsese did it with The Departed, remade Infernal Affairs, which nobody would have, not a lot of people would have known was a Chinese cop movie, and Scorsese made a masterpiece. I think it's one of his most underrated movies. A lot of people, for whatever reason, don't hold it in high regard. I just rewatched it a couple days ago. Well, I guess it was a week or two ago now. But because I was like, I really like this movie, and a lot of people, put it as like, oh, it's the one that they handed him the Oscar for, so it's got that whatever stain on it. And I remember just loving it, having it. Like I said,
Boston accent movie,
the best. It's number
all timer.
Oh yeah, I think it's better than Good Will Hunting because there's just more of it. There's just more.
Yeah.
You get
That's
a
great point.
Right?
There's more of it.
There's more of it,
Yeah.
so that's why it's better.
Okay.
But
I can agree with
to
that.
put it to take it from, the streets of Hong Kong or whatever, and put it into Boston, and just have its own Irish feel to it, and Leo playing a role that he hasn't played before or since. That type of, just so good. Matt Damon, just so good as this piece of shit that you just love being like, I hate you. Jack Nicholson basically just being Jack Nicholson. I think the greatest cast of all time as well. But I think that's one where it really took the source material that was a great movie, in itself, and did it differently enough, but I think made it better. And I think it's phenomenal, a master. But again, that was in the hands of a master. And with Killing Them Softly, like I said, there's just so much potential there, and it's really good. I think that, and it was directed by Andrew Dominic, who directed The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which I just recently watched for the first time, and I loved it. It's really, really long. It's really poetic, but it's just a beautiful film. And he's a really interesting director. But I feel like that's one where it's lesser known. It's a little bit artsy, a little slower, and it's just got so much potential that you could remake it and have it be like 310 to Yuma was a great remake, I thought. I think that's a great Western. That's a great movie. Where the original was kind of it was a little bit run-of-the-mill Western at the time, and they remade it, and just, it was definitely Hollywoodized and produced, fast-paced, a lot of fun action. I don't know if you would go that route with this, but I just feel like I wouldn't be striving for the remake to be as good as the original, just a good version of it. I don't know. Like, that's kind of was my thinking of it. So I think you could redo it and bring more people to it and have it be, because there's so much potential. I feel like you could easily make a really good, interesting movie that may be overly produced, and then bring more people to the original.
I have to agree.
Yeah.
We solved it.
We did it.
That's it.
We did it.
That's it.
Wow, that's kind of a long one, but I think we did pretty good on that one. Final thoughts here. I think we could say we're both fans of remakes when they're done right, which is hard to do. As we talked about, there's a lot of bad ones, but I think, like we really talked about there at the end, the good thing about remakes is that it brings people to the original. It really sheds light on a movie that maybe you wouldn't have been in your wheelhouse before. Like, I'm sure with the new Old Boy that came out, like you said, I feel like some people who saw it and maybe kind of liked it, even though I'm sure it was terrible, were like, oh, that was a remake, and then saw the original and were like, wow, that's a lot better. Some people think it takes away from the original. I don't know. I think the goal of anyone is to improve on it. So, any final words here?
Well done. Catch you next time.
Peace.